We do not. I think that his vote against the roll is an indication that he will likely vote against the bill itself. It's often the case. But there are also times where a member will vote against the roll in order to show their lack of support for the bill or even try to help hold it up. But then they actually will vote for the bill in the end because they don't want to be ostracized by their party or attacked for being one of the dissenters. I will say that Brian Fitzpatrick was very cautious last night to get out of the chamber and out of Capitol Hill after his vote in a way that reporters were not able to find him, and that I think more importantly his fellow members were not able to track him down and corner him and really put him on the spot. So we don't know what he'll do, but I think there's a possibility he'll be a no vote.
Zach, as you were talking there, the clock ticked all the way down to 0, and we see a preliminary vote of 216 to 213. And as you hear that, 216 to 214, excuse me, that just flipped. And so as you process that, Zach, what does that number tell you there on Capitol Hill?
It means, frankly, that we got as close to the margins as humanly possible for Republicans to pull out a victory. They could not bear to give up one more no vote, assuming that those remaining two who've not cast their votes yet vote with them. They will get over. But they really only had 3 to spare total. So assuming that those two who've not cast their votes vote as we expect them to in favor of the bill, this will get through. But if those two do not do so, it would hold things up. So we really are, by the closest possible margins, getting this bill by.
The closest possible margin. So then the natural question, what is the next move for Democrats in terms of pushing back against some of the articles in the bill, particularly those that they have been hitting on over the past, several days, healthcare, social programs, things like that?
It's going to be messaging. It's going to be getting out to those districts, particularly the battleground ones. We heard of Leader Jeffries point out particularly David Valladano and Juan Ciscomani, who are in districts that Democrats are targeting specifically. So I think we're going to see ads go up in those districts, really tying members like those members to the vote and explaining to voters, look, this is going to take away health care benefits. This is going to take away hospital funding. This is going to increase tax cuts for the rich. And really trying to hammer home to voters that for many of them, this is a bill that does not help them. So I think really the next step for Democrats is to continue what Hakeem Jeffries began today, which is the counterpunch of extreme messaging and trying, hopefully, for them to win back the House in the midterms.
I want to go back, Zach, thank you. Fantastic analysis from the Hill as this is all unfolding live. I want to go back to CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. Have we heard anything else from the White House? We know the president is always very quick to react on Truth Social. Have we heard anything yet?
Yeah, nothing yet on Truth Social. You're starting to see some statements trickle out from White House officials, Deputy Chief of Staff, and during his campaign, a key political director, James Blair, posted thanking the White House Legislative Affairs team for getting this bill across the finish line. James wrote, quote, "It is the most consequential piece of Republican legislation in decades." We know that at least tonight, while he is speaking on the Iowa State Fair grounds, President Trump will be listing this bill as part of his, quote, accomplishments. That's what one White House official told us in a preview of his speech there. So he's definitely taking it directly to the people that will be impacted by this bill, at least tonight in Iowa.
Aaron, I'm curious to know, so many families are gathering for the 4th of July holiday, and you mentioned getting the message to Iowa, but what do you think the White House's goal here is for that barbecue conversation when it comes to this legislation?
Yeah, I mean, it's been something that they're going to be talking about and celebrating, in a sense, during the July 4th festivities. We've also heard potentially that the president may go out and travel to really play up the impacts of this bill. But just to touch on the point you made earlier, Democrats are just as eager to get on the road and potentially criticize this bill as well. We learned earlier today that California Governor Gavin Newsom, potential 2028 candidate, should he choose to do so, will be in the Palmetto State in South Carolina next week. We've seen him be critical about this bill. Other governors like Josh Shapiro, J.B. Pritzker of Illinois. So it's certainly fodder for when you think about 2028. But in terms of, the near term, the fact that some of the Medicaid cuts may not take effect until after the 2026 midterms could potentially help Republicans. But the White House is certainly celebrating at least this phase of it passing. We'll see how they look to amplify, positive sentiment about the bill in the coming weeks.
Aaron, it looks as we follow this, there's one vote remaining, which means the GOP, preliminarily at least, has the votes to pass this bill. So as we look ahead to impact and also, sort of that early stage legacy, is there a sense that this bill will be the defining piece of legislation in the second term, at least so far?
Yeah, it definitely has the potential to be because, control of Congress could change in just a year or so and going into the last 2 years of President Trump's term. I think that's part of the reason why he really pushed to get this across the finish line now, why he, as Zach mentioned, really played an outsized role in whipping Republican votes in Congress. Another big part of this that the White House and officials have been playing up are his 2017, Trump tax cuts staying in place throughout the rest of his term and the coming years. That has been something, as the president has defended this bill in recent months, is something he has always pointed back to, suggesting that should his tax cuts expire, as they were set to do later this year, that people's taxes could go up. And that was kind of the argument he made in part for this bill. So certainly it is one big swing that the president took to get a lot of his legislative priorities when it comes to taxes, the economy, when it comes to immigration, and this may be the best political window for him to do so in his second term.
In terms of immediate impact, Aaron, I know we talk a lot about process and horse race and what this could mean in the next few minutes, next few days. But when you look at this legislation and you look at what's coming out of the White House, what do you think the first impact will be?
I think the first impact may be when people are starting to file their tax returns next April. The White House has argued that the tax, cuts, the tax status remaining at the status quo will be the first immediate impact. People won't be seeing their taxes go up, as the White House has argued. But some of the early estimates is that people's tax returns could also increase as well going into April. Again, it's interesting, though, as you have talked about earlier in this hour, that some of the more controversial cuts to Medicaid, Medicare take place down the line after the 2026 midterms. So some of the really heavy impacts that people could be feeling are later down the line. But at least fiscally, that seems to be what the White House is suggesting people will benefit most from in the immediate term.
Aaron Navarro, thank you so much. And by the way, it's exactly 2:30 Eastern time here on the East Coast. And if you're just joining us now, you can take a look at a live look at the House floor, where we're getting that preliminary vote coming in, 217 to 214 on President Trump's mega bill. And we are waiting for that final vote to come in. And I'd like to go back to Capitol Hill. Let's bring back Zach Hudak to tell us about, what is happening. We see 217 to 214, one NV left, one vote left to be cast, I should say. How long could we be waiting for this one? Who was it?
The leadership of whichever party controls the House at any given time has control over when the floor opens and when it closes. So even though that time limit is up, this could theoretically go on indefinitely. What we see happening on the floor there with all the members bunched together is a pressure campaign on that last remaining voter to try to get them to vote in favor of the bill. I think Republicans want that vote, want a strong victory. And I think that as a result, Mike Johnson is leaving the floor open as long as they have to get that vote where they want it. The truth is, even after that vote is cast, they could leave the floor open and try to force folks to change their votes. And that just illustrates really the advantage you have when you are the majority party in the House of Representatives. You control when the vote starts and when the vote ends. So I would expect this to end any moment.
I hate to interrupt you, but it does look like we have a final vote, 218 to 214.
Change a vote. No.
Largely along those party lines as expected. It looks like it's wrapped up a little quicker than we may have expected. What do you think?
I think that's right. But I think what we just witnessed with that slight delay at the end was the pressure campaign I was explaining. They were ready to leave it open a little bit longer if they needed to, but they were clearly able to convince that last member that dissenting
Zach,
would not leave.
Pardon the interruption here. We are going to go to Speaker Johnson, who's now speaking from the dais.
Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
All right, we heard a bunch of chants there from lawmakers clapping, chanting USA, USA. Speaker Johnson briefly taking the seat there, and now he's coming back down off of the podium. Let's bring back Zach, who's on Capitol Hill with us. You know, I like to get into the nitty-gritty here, and Zach Hudak on Capitol Hill. What do we know about some of these last-minute concessions that the White House made to some of the GOP holdouts? What were those last final conversations like?
We've been hearing some details from some of those members and hits they've done on cable and things like that, but we've not heard from the president. So I'd want to hold off till I hear from him what he's actually agreed to. But they are basically him promising to use his bully pulpit, his megaphone as the president, to support other initiatives that those members are interested in. And it's something that was particularly important for members in particularly red districts, because those members have to be able to go home this weekend for 4th of July and explain to their constituents who in those red districts want to see spending pulled back. They have to explain why the deficit is going to be raised $3 trillion for this bill. So by having a few concessions or a few things that the president said he'll help them out with, it helps them as they give that message to their constituents. They get to say, okay, we are going to be spending some more money, but the president has promised he's going to help us out on this, which will help you specifically. So I think that's why that was so impactful, particularly with those hardline Republicans.
Zach, the House is now officially adjourned. They passed President Trump's mega bill, 218 to 214. We're going to go back now to the White House, to our CBS News White House reporter, Aaron Navarro. Aaron, the bill is officially passed through the House. What do you expect the president to say in terms of a victory, which he will clearly see this as in his eyes?
Yeah, he will certainly tout it as an accomplishment of his agenda, his second term so far. One White House official tells us he's going to bring it up tonight during his remarks at the Iowa State Fairgrounds, where he will largely talk about, celebrating the anniversary of America and his 250th anniversary going into next year. But it's certainly something the White House, the president, has, projected confidence that it will pass, but at the same time, taking no expense. We saw that President Trump worked the phones a lot yesterday to get some of these Republican holdouts to vote in favor of the bill. But I'm refreshing Truth Social just in case he has any reactive statement. But so far, it feels like the next time we'll hear from him react to the passing of this bill will be in Iowa.
You mentioned earlier that there's already plans underway for a ceremonial bill signing at the White House. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that'll be tomorrow afternoon, where he will sign the bill in a public event here at the White House, potentially right before some of the July 4th festivities, before he heads to Bedminster, New Jersey. So it's been something that the White House, even hours before the actual vote happened, telegraphed that they were confident that there would be some sort of big ceremony, and that's expected for tomorrow afternoon.
So, Aaron, what happens next now that this presumably will be signed in the coming hours and days? Once President Trump finishes that, what should people expect to be next in terms of the top priority on his agenda?
Certainly, foreign policy seems to be something that on the side and potentially going into this weekend is going to be at the forefront for President Trump. We know that he spoke to Russian President Putin earlier today. We have heard developments when it comes to Special Envoy Steve Witkoff working with Israel, an intermediary to work with Hamas in terms of getting a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. So the focus may turn back to that. It may shift to immigration. You saw the president visit what has been dubbed, quote, Alligator Alcatraz in Florida earlier this week. But this certainly was something that President Trump had put a lot of political capital behind, at least in terms of getting this bill passed.
Aaron Navarro hanging with us for the last 36 minutes and 30 seconds through all of that breaking news and the final vote there in the House. Thank you so much for being with us today. We got some new data today that shows a stronger than expected labor market here in the U.S. The Labor Department says the U.S. added 147,000 jobs in June. That's tens of thousands of more jobs than many economists were predicting. And the unemployment rate also ticked down to 4.1%. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is here with me. Why did we see such a strong jobs report based off of those expectations?
Government jobs. So this is really an interesting split, right? We've heard, okay, companies aren't hiring as much. They're slow to replace roles that have been emptied. Maybe people left. But we did see a slowing in growth in the private sector. And so that really comports with what we've seen anecdotally and you and I have been reporting on.
Yeah.
And there's a chart up right now for our viewers, which I find very interesting. We split out where the growth came from in private and public being government. You see April, private was really what was driving it.